right, so hello. We have a couple weeks left. It is crazy. I've enjoyed my time with you guys, but we have 2 weeks to get a lot done. So especially social studies wise, I still have a lot to cover. We're going to be squeaking under the wire with that one. But yes, we are going to talk today a little bit about English and studying for English and all that jazz. And I know a lot of you feel like very confident in English, but we want to make sure you're super confident and super ready. And then we're gonna also, some of our English today is going to tie in with our social studies. So let me share my screen. All right, sharing screen. Minimize everything. That's later. Okay, that's for tomorrow. Look at me, I'm overachieving. Okay, so today we're going to talk about theme. And finding the meaning in literature. So as you're reading, and if you read books, which I hope that you read House on Mango Street, I hope that you read some of the stuff that I included in your packet. I didn't require them, but I think it's good to have a book with you. And sometimes paper is just easier than looking at on. I still prefer paper books instead of actually reading them because I feel like I get distracted easier if it's on my phone or a tablet. I like the physical touch and turning the page. Everybody has a different point of view on that. So let's talk about this. I'm trying to minimize this. Hold on. No, go away. All right, so this just talks about the Common Core. All of your task test is based on the Common Core standards. So the essential question, what is a theme and how do I identify evidence to support it? I can analyze a specific evidence, I gotta minimize you guys, through class discussion and determine themes and best topics. So theme, finding a meaning in literature. What is a theme? A theme is a truth about life revealed in a work of literature. So it's theme, the message. See it? Theme, the message. Theme tends to focus on discoveries about the big topics and subjects in everybody's life. So what are some big topics? Like when we talk about big topics, what are those? So responsibility. Responsibility is a huge topic, right? It could be the responsibility of you recycling. It could be the responsibility of you driving slower. It could be the responsibility of drinking responsible, right? So you're gonna get some of these when you're reading your articles for your essay question, you're gonna get stuff about responsibility. Like a lot of the questions have to do about responsibility. Could be about relationships. And don't just think about it, yes, think about it as like relationship from person to person, but it could also be a relationship to person to animal. It could be relationship to person and object. I have a relationship with my phone. I'm addicted to my phone. It's a relationship because it never goes out of my hand, right? We all have a relationship with our electronic devices. We can love or hate them, or we use them often. It can be relationships to like two things, any two things. So it could be the relationship between drinking and driving. Those are relationships. It could be like the earth and trees, right? It could be relationships between anything. So don't just think like relationship with people to people. I want you to think relationships like in a broader sense. It could be anything as long as it's like between two or more things. So we have like family relationships, friendships, like stuff like that. Those are still relationships and valid, but you can have relationships. I have a relationship with coffee every morning. I have to have coffee. That is my relationship, right? I have a relationship with work. I have to, I show up, I do my job. That is my relationship. So it's more than just what you think it is. in the love sense. When people say relationships, they just usually think about love. I just want you to understand that it's way more about that. There's way more things that relationship means. Success. Success, and I successfully did that math problem. I successfully wrote that essay. I successfully wrote down in my planner today what I had to do, and I did it, right? So success can look like a lot of things. It could be small, it could be large. Fitting in. So this could be you fitting into a place. This could be fitting in how you identify and fitting into society. It could be like, and it's kind of fitting in and relationships kind of go hand in hand. But fitting in, it can be like, fitting in with that group. Fitting in like your persona now and fitting that into a workplace, fitting inside a workplace, which is completely different. Like when you have like that like 9-to-5 job that, pays the bills and has insurance and all that jazz, like the fitting in process and how that looks. And sometimes like everybody struggles with fitting in. Even the people who say they don't do, right? So fitting in, just know that it's more than just like you. Loss. This one's kind of self-explanatory. Everybody experiences loss at some point in their life. Truth. What is the truth? What is the truth about such and such? What is the truth about this? We seek the truth, right? So big topics, those are themes, right? So themes, and as you're reading stuff, you're gonna you have to think about the theme. The theme is like the most important thing to think about, because that's gonna base your whole, if you're doing a writing on it, if you're doing your task essay, the theme and the big topic is what you're actually writing about. All right. Theme is not a topic or subject, right? So a topic is let me think of a topic. Should students wear uniforms to school, right? That's the topic of the essay. Should students wear uniforms to school? So, but the theme of that is way more, right? Your theme could be fitting in, it's relationships, it's it has a big, more broad sense than just the topic. Topics and subjects are what the author has chosen to write about. For example, The Outsiders include a struggle for survival, rival gains, delinquent behaviors, and outcoming stereotypes. But the overall theme is those big topics, not just the subjects and the little stuff, right? You want the big stuff. Theme is not a summary of plot either. Plot is a series of events within the story. So your plot could be about, I'm trying to think of a great plot. It could be all right, let's take Harry Potter, because I'm a forever Harry Potter fan. The plot of Harry Potter is about a boy, and he overcomes Voldemort and Voldemort, sorry, and overcomes a lot of struggles. But the theme in it is a lot about relationships and successes and failures, right? Those are the themes. In each it could a theme can change within the book. That's another. So this one talks about The Outsiders. It's a great read. If you haven't read anything yet, please read The Outsiders. It is a great book. The theme is about what the author has to say about the subject, or he or she has written about. The delinquent behaviors in The Outsiders. What are they saying about it? Is that the greasers, which is part of The Outsiders, are constantly upset because of their delinquent behaviors and reputation. They never get any good press or credit, but the Sox do. Eventually, they're the ones who save the kids from the fire. So like it's a lot about theme. Is like what is supported in the theme. The theme is like the relationships and like the successes, right? Even those who participate in delinquent behaviors can be capable of great things is a theme. Even those who participate in delinquent behaviors can be capable of great things. All right, let's subject versus theme. Subjects are usually just one or two words. What is the story about? Themes are full sentences or sayings. What is the lesson of the author is trying to communicate about the subject? Subjects, sacrifice, family, consequences, hardships and struggle, love. Themes, love conquers all. Good triumphs over evil. Honesty is the best policy. Crime doesn't pay. Sacrifices bring reward. So, all right, let's talk about this. What is the subject of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? So, Anson, you're my guinea pig today. Are you there? Anson. Anson, are you with me? Anson. All right, so the subject of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, what is the story? The story what's the story about? You know, it is friendship. It's working together, right? Community, beauty, dealing with differences, good versus evil, jealousy, running away. Those are things about, those are the things that are going on as a subject. So next, using the subject jealousy for Snow White and Seven Dwarfs, what is the theme? Could be, before you decide on a theme, you should look at the jealousy within the story. How are the jealous characters portrayed? What do they do? How do they eventually end up? Given what we know about the evil queen, who is jealous in the story, what is the author trying to say about jealousy? Jealousy is a powerful emotion that can destroy lives. That's the overarching theme about jealousy. This is one of the themes of Snow White. Obviously there was more, but as you see, like subjects are like the tiny, like 1 word, 2 word words, right? Theme is like a sentence. Stories can have more than one theme. More themes for the Hunger Games could be teamwork often leads to success. Making a difference takes hard work. Everyone is their own person and no one belongs to anyone else. Too much power can lead to chaos. Some themes in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs could be love conquers all. Good triumphs over evil. Good people are blessed while bad people are punished. Be careful that you don't get too specific with your themes. So this is like Themes aren't specific to the work of literature that you're reading, but relevant to everybody. So a theme should be relevant to you, to me, to Steve, to Bob, to everybody, right? They should not include specific events, characters, or setting from the text. Dwarves are helpful is too specific to the Snow White story. See how that was like really the bow and arrow will help you survive the Hunger Games. It's too specific for the story. Like, it's not taking details from the story is basically what they're trying to get off. Splitting the country into districts would never work. It is too specific for the Hunger Games. Being evil will turn you into a witch and you'll fall off a cliff is too specific for Snow White. Review these steps. Okay, so here's the steps. Identify some subjects in the text that it talks about. So ask yourself, if I boil the story down to 1 or 2 words, what is it about? Bullying, peer pressure, relationships, success. Ask yourself, what happens in the plot to the characters in the text that relate to those subjects? Jane is bullied by other girls in her class because of the music she likes. She is tempted to quit her band, even though she's worked really hard to get where she was. Look for a story's resolution. How is the conflict in the story resolved? What happens at the end of the relation to the subjects? Jane decides not to quit her band. Jane band wins the talent show at her school, and suddenly all the kids at the other school want to know more about her music. Now look for lessons that the character learns or is implied in the text. Try to form these findings into complete sentences. Be true to yourself. Hard work will eventually pay off. You should always have text evidence to support your theme. So you can't just like pull a subject and then like make a theme off of it. Like you need to know what the story is about. This will go true to anything that you're reading in your test. Like you need to know what is going on. Even in those little paragraph blurbs, you still need to know like what the overarching theme is. And that is the end of themes. All right. I like me some Prezi, as you can tell. All right, so we are going to move on, and I want to like hit this. Now, this is for ELA Regents, right? But you're going to take a test very shortly. Hopefully, we'll find out some dates for coming up soon. But these are some like, and I'm going to go over like test prep, like study things or like ways to help you through the test, because I find it really important and some things you might not have heard before. So first off is that part 1, like this is for the Regents, it's going to be a little bit different for task, but these hold true. You're going to answer multiple choice questions, understanding what the question is saying. So you want to underline, like it's going to be a highlight or underline of the keywords. It's going to be look back to the text kind of questions, and it's going to be rule out all the wrong answers. So the first one, part 1. So you're actually gonna have a whole entire test on reading comprehension. Essentially, your reading test is about reading comprehension. So you always want to go back to the passage and reread the line number given in the question. So first, you're gonna read the whole passage. Then you're going to go look at the questions. Then you're going to go back and reread the line that was given to the question. In fact, read the whole paragraph that the line is located in, because sometimes what they're looking for is going to be either the sentence before or the sentence after. So you kind of have to know that context. And that's really important, because a lot of people just go and answer the questions, look at the multiple choice, go back and read and get done as fast as possible. Okay, there's merit in that, but there's also merit of quick reading the text, going to the number, reading that paragraph that it's in. So if you come up with 2 answers, use the process of elimination to choose between them. Never leave a multiple choice questions blank. And you should always double check your answers before leaving the test. Take it from me, you want to double check your answers, because TABE especially, this is how I gauge a lot of my students, and is how they take the TABE, because sometimes they'll take the TABE and they'll whiz right through it and they're getting questions wrong, and they try to argue it and they realize that the question was asking the opposite of what they thought. So always, once you get done, double check all your answers. I know it's time consuming. I know it sucks. Nobody wants to do it, but double check your answers. Never leave a multiple choice question blank. It's better to guess than not guess at all, right? Because what happens if you guess right on you have like, you're running out of time, and say you like have a bunch of ones left. If you guess the right question, then you get a point, right? And if you left it blank, you just get it wrong. So always, 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 always put something into the multiple choice. Never leave a question blank. All right, so you're gonna have an argumentative essay, right? You're gonna have arguing two sides, and they're gonna give you, we've talked about this in length, especially about writing. They're gonna give you two articles. I'm gonna give you more samples next week of what they're looking for. Oh, sorry. So read the question. It will tell you what the topic is going to be. Choose a side. So that's called making a claim. You're going to choose a side, whether you're for it or against it. Find 3 reasons in your articles. And as we talked, you want to kind of go through your articles and, create a system for yourself. You can either do plus, that's great, minus, that's not. You can circle it, you want to highlight it, you want to write in the margins or on a scrap piece of paper. Find 2 more pieces of evidence that support each of the reasons from the text. So you want to find as much evidence and like things to back up what your claim. Like they want you to go through the text and pull stuff from the text, either put it in your own words or quotation it. They want that. So don't discredit that. And create a counterclaim. So you want to make sure that you have these are your like 6 like breakdowns. So you want to choose a side. So you're going to make your claim, your opening paragraph. Find 3 reasons to support your side. Find 2 evidence to support each reason from your text. Create a counterclaim. So you can't write an essay stating your claim if you don't show the counterclaim. You have to argue the other side too. And then you have to come back and you have to break down the other side and refute the counterclaim and say your claim's best, essentially. So intro paragraph, give some background on the topic, define the topic, give some history, get information from your text. Introduce your claim. What is the side that you're arguing? Use the prompt, the question to help make the claim. Use the prompt. They want you to use the prompt. Don't restate it word for word, but they want you to use the prompt. Introduce the 3 reasons to support your claim. The body. Introduce the reasons, 2 pieces of evidence to support each one of your reasons. So you have 3 paragraphs, 3 reasons. It could be 2 different paragraphs. It could be 1 large paragraph. Just watch it when you do 1 large paragraph. It is better sometimes to break it up for the reader. And then you want to do your counterclaim. You always have to do the back side of it. So if it is like, one question could be, should the drinking age be lowered from 21? So like, should it be lowered or should it stay at 21? So it's like, it'll like ask you questions if it should be lowered or not. And like the counterpart to whatever side you're going to take. So like, no, I don't think the drinking age should be lowered to 18. I think it should stay at 21, but I can understand because of XYZ as a counterclaim. But make sure your rebuttal is like the other side of that. So you definitely want to wrap up with your reasons, and with a comment, don't allow this crisis to continue type of thing. A question, are you willing to waste so many lives of everything? A call to action, I highly recommend you consider these options next time you're faced with this decision, right? So like those things make it like people will be inspired to do something if it helps other people, if it hits home with them by asking a question, or and those are the two. Like I love call to action and I love the question, right? Those are two powerful essays. The comment is the most seen, but if you really, really, really want that extra point, if you really want to go the mile, do a call to action and like put the person on the stand. Like get behind what you write, right? And like make that call to action. Otherwise, do a question, because people are going to respond really well internally to those two things. All right, so you're also going to have to look at text. And so this goes back to your writing portion. So in Regents, there's like part 1, part 2, part 3. This actually has your reading, writing is text analysis and reading comprehension. Your writing is grammar, sentence structure, and writing. So central idea, the main idea, overcall the overall theme that the entire text is about, not just one thing that's happening in the entire view of the text, about love, about friendship, overcoming. We just talked about theme, right? That's that central idea. There could be more than just one central idea or more than one theme, right? What is the author telling us about the theme? The author is telling us that love is a wonderful thing. You can make it if they try hard enough. Those are like central ideas, right? Writing strategy, tools that authors use. So literary devices like imagery, characterization, simile, metaphors. You want the emotional sympathy. You want ethical trusting and moral and logic. So like those things you want to look for. So paragraph 1, they're going to tell you like what's the author trying to do, what are they trying to achieve, as you go through. So you're going to have these questions through this, and I want to come over here. So here's an example, and Anson, I'm probably going to put you on the spot, so I hope you're paying attention. But here's a question: where should the following sentence be placed in the paragraph below? So many people have proposed explanations for this drop. So the whole thing says, surveys of criminal activity in the United States have shown that the 1990s marked a significant drop in crimes such as vehicle theft, rape, and murder. Economicist Rick Nevin argues that one contributing factor is the ban on lead gasoline in the 1970s, because lead poisoning in children has been linked with criminal behavior later in life. Other theories include the controversial claim that legalizing abortion has led to fewer unwanted children and, as a result, fewer potential crimes. Some politicians, including Rudy Giuliani, even take personal responsibility, identifying their policies as effective deterrents to crime. So many people should have proposed explanations for this drop. So where would this go? Anson, are you with me? So it really needs to go, as surveys of criminal activity in the United States have shown that the 1990s have marked a significant drop in crimes such as vehicle theft, rape, and murder. Many people have proposed explanations for this drop after sentence 1. All right, so you can come over here and you can take a lot of these, and a lot of them are going to be like, where should these go, right? They're going to have these type of questions. And as you go on, you can start to realize, and I want you to take as many tests as you can. But like, that's a great example. I'm going to do one more. So where should this go? Insects that carry the disease can develop resistance to the chemicals or insecticides that are used to kill mosquitoes. So this is talking about malaria. Malaria, a disease spread by insects and parasites, has long proven to be difficult to treat. Part of the explanation has to do with the adaptation or the ability of one generation to pass its strengths on to another. Some insects are simply not affected by these insecticides. Unfortunately, these are the insects that survive and go on to reproduce, creating another generation of insects that are immune to the current insecticides. Many researchers have abandoned hope for insecticides as a cure for malaria, turning their attention instead on other forms of defense, such as protein blockers that humans from the effects of disease instead of the carriers. So insects that carry the disease can develop resistance to the chemicals, insecticides that are used to kill mosquitoes. So like, where would we put this? Some insects are not, I would probably put it in right between 3 and 4. So right after sentence 3. 3. Sorry. Next. And then you'll get questions like this. What sentence does not belong in the paragraph? There's 2 of those. Read the following passage. And then you're going to start going through and it's going to ask you questions from the passage, right? Which version of the following portion of sentence 2 provides the most clarity, right? So you're going to have these kinds of questions. Take as many of these kind of English tests as you can to get to it. Then the next one is like, what is a clear way to rewrite sentences 6 and 7? So you want to like go through and like, these are really great examples. These are from practice tests of like what you're going to get, right? Is sometimes can we refer to the initial this of the sentence refers to what? Because the sentence 8 was poorly written, right? So I want you to go through and I want you to take these tests because it's really, really important to like understand what they're going to ask you. And plus, it's probably been a while since you've actually taken a test like this. And TABE is not like task. TABE just tells us where you are. Task is like a long few days. It's a long 2 days that you're going to have to sit there and you're going to have to test. So I'm just preparing you that you should probably take as many practice tests as possible, especially if you think you're amazing at English and you think, like, I got this, like, that's fine. I'm cool. I think you probably got it, but I still want you to take some practice tests because it's probably been a while. Okay, so take some of these tests. This one happens to be by the MOMTricks.com Academy task. There's so many practice task websites you can take. This one goes through eventually and tells you all your answers and if you got them right or wrong. So take these. Oh, sorry. So take these and like really, really pay attention to what you're reading and writing. Okay, so moving on, and this is somewhat English, somewhat social studies, and I want to make sure that like this is something that you guys should know, right? We're talking about U.S. history, and I'm going to segue from this reading over to U.S. history, and we're going to talk more about it. But I want to read it as part of reading today. I will read it just so you can hear it. But I want you to understand. So we're going to talk about the Civil War today, because after the American Revolutionary War, once we got our independence, like it soon became apparent that like we had a bunch of people, especially in the South, and the North too, that were using slaves to make ends meet, essentially. And the Civil War broke out is from the abolishment of slavery, and we're going to get into all of that jazz. And like, obviously, the root of Black Lives Matter. We're like, so we're going to get into this in a little bit more. But I want to come here and I want to read the Gettysburg Address. So the president during the Civil War was President Lincoln. So President Lincoln delivered the 272-word Gettysburg Address on November 19th, 1863, on the battlefield near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And it says, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in the Great Civil War, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on the great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as the final resting place for those who here gave their lives that a nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world little know nor long will remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they have fought here, have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task of remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they have gave the last measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that a government of people, of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. So this is the Gettysburg Address. This is what President Lincoln said on the battlefield of Gettysburg, which is in Pennsylvania. It's not that far away. And he gave this address right at the end of the battle, right at the end of this. As you'll see, like they still fought for a little bit after, but it was pretty much over by then. And with this, I want to segue into it, but I think like reading historical things, and of course we're talking about U.S. history, so I wanted to have a reading today so that you had an idea of what we're going to talk about. But the next few times I'm going to have readings. Now there's a lot of words even I stumbled through, right? I mean, you have words like consecrate. You have words like, what's another word that like fourscore? Like what on earth is fourscore, right? And these are things like if you were reading, you'd probably look them up, right? But you can't in a task test. So you know that like 7 years ago. So this is actually talking about the battle, it was talking about how we gained ourselves as a nation, right? And there's all these words. So sometimes you have to like, it's like, if you didn't know what this word, because it looks like consecrate, right? Like you kind of get it, but it's like consecrate is like having a spot to bury the dead. It's obviously talking about where to put the dead and having a proper place to do this, and eventually going over the themes. So I want to talk here about the Civil War. And let me start the slideshow. All right, so the Civil War. All right, it's from 1861 to 1865. So it's a 4-year battle, essentially, kind of. So here, take a screenshot. Yeah. So we want to talk about it. So we have the North. So these are the key phrases. So Union, abolish slavery. General was Ulysses S. Grant. Women and immigrants as well as men provided labor for the growing economy. Industrial. So the North, in the North, here's something about America you need to know that, and we're just talking about North America, right? Just us, our continent of the United States. So we're past like all the continents. Now we're just talking about us. The North, we do factories. You have Ford over in Michigan. You have all these like huge, like my area up in Gloversville, Johnstown was like tons of glove factories, right? We have factories. We do factories. Schenectady, you have GE. You have all these factories. You have, I believe it's iron and steel works over in Troy, like just factories. We do factories. We do factories well. Do we do agriculture? Yes, but not as much as the South. The South does agriculture so much better than we do. Why? Because our season is longer. We have winter. The North has winter, so we cannot grow in the winter. So we end up like importing stuff from the South to get food, right? And to get goods. And plus they have better soil down south than we do. So the South is the Confederacy, opposed to Lincoln's policies in seceded. So seceded is to like separate from. The general was Robert E. Lee. And again, North does factories, South does agriculture. That comes really important because like the big contention of the South opposing these is because they have so much agricultural things that they need to work on. Like they didn't have enough manpower to cultivate all the stuff that they need to cultivate from the farms. All right. The Civil War of 1861 to 1865 determined what kind of nation it would be. So the outcome of this war really determined on what kind of nation we were going to have from the end of it. Right. So now we are our own nation. We are not under British rule, but then we have all this contention coming up from it. Right. We have two different kind of points of view, and those points of view led to the war. The war resolved two fundamental questions left unresolved from the Revolution: whether the United States has to be a dissolvable confederation of sovereign states or an indivisible nation with a sovereign national government. Right, so there's one thing. Should it be up to individual states like it's been, or like areas, or should it just be one big nation? Born of a declaration that all men were created equal with a right to liberty, would continue to exist as a large slaveholding country in the world. All right. The causes. While the United States was experiencing an era of tremendous growth, the fundamental economic difference existed between the North and South regions. In the North, manufacturing industry was well established. Agriculture was mostly limited to small-scale farms, while the Southern economy was based on a system of large-scale farming and dependent on the labor of Black slaves to grow certain crops, especially cotton and tobacco. The growing abolitionist sentiment from the North after the 1830s and the Northern opposition to slavery extension into the new Western territories led many Southerners to fear that the existence of slavery in America, thus the backbone of their economy, was in danger. So again, the South had these huge farms. And like, I know you see small farms up here and you can't fathom, but we're talking like hundreds of acres. We're talking like hundreds of acres of like crops. Like my farm has 300 acres and we grow crops on that and hay and all that sort of thing. These are like huge farms. And they needed Black slaves to, back then, they needed Black slaves to help cultivate their product. And they were fear, because if they didn't have the manpower to get their crops, like how are they going to survive, type of thing. That was the thought process back then. Obviously, we're not talking now. We're talking back then in the 1800s. In 1854, the United States Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which essentially opened all new territories to slavery by asserting the rule of popular sovereignty over the congressional edict. Pro and anti-slavery forces struggled violently in the Bleeding of Kansas, while the opposition to the act in the North led the formation of the Republican Party. Now, the Republican Party that they are talking about is not the Republican Party of today, okay? It flip-flopped. So what we now call the Democratic Party was more closely related to the Republican Party back in the 1800s. There's a whole big reason why it changed, but don't think of like today's world society when we're talking about this. We're talking, it's kind of flip-flopped. A new political entity based on principle of opposing slavery's extension into the Western territories. After the Supreme Court's ruling on the Dred Scott case in 1857 confirmed the legality of slavery in the territories, the abolitionist John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry in 1859 convinced more and more Southerners that their northern neighbors were bent on the destruction of the peculiar institution that sustained them. So again, these are the southern states that we're talking about right now. These are the southern states. These are the crop growers. The blue ones up here, these are the north. The ones that are in between are like the bridge. But these, think industry for blue, think agriculture for red. Abraham Lincoln election in November 1860 was the final straw. And within 3 months, 7 southern states, so these 7 states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, seceded. So see how it's separated from? So that means seceded. They separated from us. So these became their own place. They became the Confederacy from the United States. They separated from the United States. And that's the rest of the United States they separated from, seceded. So here's this is the election. This is a cartoon from that era. Obviously it's Abe Lincoln versus his competitor, and Abe Lincoln came out on top. Okay, the event that triggered the war came at Fort Sumter in Charleston Bay on April 12, 1861, claiming the United States fort as their own. The Confederate Army on that day opened fire on the Federal garrison and forced it to lower their American flag and surrender. Lincoln called out the militia to suppress the insurrection. 4 more slave states seceded and joined the Confederacy. By the end of 1861, nearly 1 million armed men confronted each other along the line stretching 1,200 miles from Virginia to Missouri. Several battles had already taken place near Manassas Junction in Virginia, in the mountains of West Virginia, where the Union victories paved the way for the creation of a new state called West Virginia. At Wilson's Creek in Missouri, at Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, at Port Royal in South Carolina, where the Union blocked the Navy and established a base for blockade and shut off the Confederates' access to the rest of the world. So those were some of the beginning battles that took place. So this is a picture this is an actual photograph from the Civil War. As you can see, it's very granulated. This is starting to decay. This is very typical. The cameras, you had to be very, very still for a very long time to get these. You'll also see a lot of tin types during that area. But the real fighting began in 1862. Huge battles like Shiloh in Tennessee, Gaines Mill, Second Manassas, Fredericksburg, and Antietam in Maryland foreshadowed bigger campaigns and battles in subsequent years. So from Gettysburg to Vicksburg to Chickamauga, all these were huge, big battles that were basically in it. The one thing about the Civil War was it's like father against son. It could be neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother, right? So it was people fighting on either side. And it was a huge war. So just know it was a battle, and they were fighting a lot. And it could be people you knew that you were fighting against. So basically you have this huge thing, and the whole thing was trying to do the birth of a new freedom, which is what the whole Gettysburg Address is about, to dedicate a cemetery for the Union soldiers who were killed in battle there. So here's a picture from the Civil War. For 3 long years, from 1862 to 1865, Robert E. Lee Army of the North Virginia staved off the invasions attacked by the Union Army of the Potomac, commanded by a series of effective generals, until Ulysses S. Grant came to Virginia in Western Theater and became the general-in-chief of all the Union armies. After bloody battles took place in places like the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, Petersburg, Grant finally brought Lee at bay at the Potomacs. In the meantime, Union armies, river fleets in the theater of the war, compromising of slave states, the Western Appalachian Mountain chain one long series of victories over Confederate armies and committed hapless or unlucky Confederate generals. So as we go on, we have all these things. It was like these battles on, and let me go back to here, because it was, all right. So here is where most of the battle, wherever you see this like red, blue, that's a lot of where, like, and it's like kind of like red, blue is like a lot of the fighting took place, and a little bit of the states that were like obviously obviously there was like, here's Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Gettysburg's like right up in here, like right over here by the end of the P. So you have all these states that were neighboring, and that these were where all the battles took place. They also had really cool inventions during this time. So this is where you get the hot air balloon taking place. So you have like the creation of these like aids to help, right? So you have all these things. This is also like, you start having more guns, better guns starting to take place. Well, here's a picture of Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee. They were the two generals. President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, as the nation approached its third year of bloody civil war. The proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves with rebellious states should henceforth shall be free. Despite the expansive wording of the Emancipation Proclamation was limited in many ways, it applied only to the states that had seceded from the United States, leaving slavery untouched in loyal border states, and also expressly exempted the parts of the Confederacy that had already come under the Northern control. Most important, the freedom it promised depended on the Union Army victory. Although the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery in the nation, it captured heart in the imagination of Americans and firmly transformed the character of the war. After January 1st, 1863, every advance of the federal troops expanded the domain of freedom. Moreover, the proclamation announced the acceptance of Black men into the Union Army and Navy, enabling the liberated to become liberators. By the end of the war, almost 200,000 Black soldiers and sailors fought for the Union and for freedom. So here's like Emancipation Proclamation. Here's like a newspaper article clipping. By 1865, all the principal Confederation armies had surrendered, and the Union cavalry captured the fleeing Confederate President Jefferson Davis in Georgia on May 10th, 1865. The resistance collapsed and the war ended. The long, painful process of rebuilding a united nation free of slavery began. So I want you to watch this. Hopefully it plays. Yes.
We'll put it bluntly, the life of a Civil War soldier sucked. Sure, all war is hell, but if you signed up to be a Civil War soldier, it was essentially the equivalent to signing your own death certificate. Today, we're exploring what life was really like to be a Civil War soldier. But before we get started, this is a good time to subscribe to our channel, Weird History. Leave us a comment or tell us what weird phenomenon, person, or event you'd like us to cover next. Now, let's go to the 1860s. Of the 2.7 million soldiers who fought in the Civil War, in over 237 named battles along with a bunch of smaller, albeit bloody face-offs and confrontations, they all weren't brawny, bearded adult men with wives and slaves back home. Approximately 420,000 were Northern boys under the age of 17, and the South had an estimated 100,000 soldiers under the age of 15. These boys weren't landowners, and they definitely didn't own slaves. As a matter of fact, it's reported that the teens on both sides of the war had neutral feelings toward slavery. The reason why these kids joined the war was simply that they wanted to escape their dull farm lives at home. Thanks to Abraham Lincoln's call for a short 90-day tour of duty, a Union soldier could enlist, fit in his combat time for a few months, and then return home for accolades and a hero's welcome. What the Northern soldiers couldn't have predicted was that the Civil War was going to drag out for years. After the Union was driven out of Richmond in the Peninsula Campaign of 1862, the Confederate Army began to march on to Washington. The South was starting to look like they had a chance to win this thing, thanks to their Peninsula win. That's when Lincoln issued a call for 300,000 more Union soldiers with 3-year commitments. Only a fraction of those 300,000 Union soldiers would last their 3 years of brutal combat. How desperate were the underage boys to join the Civil War and begin living life? Well, there had been a lot of rules to get in. For example, they relied on semantics. Because the rules of combat stated that a soldier must be over 18 to join the military, an underage kid would write the number 18 on the sole of a shoe or stuff a piece of paper with the number 18 scrawled on it and hide it in his boot. Then when the recruiter would ask if the boy was over 18, the future war hero would technically be telling the truth by answering, "Yes, I am over 18. If that didn't work, the kids would just lie about their age because social security numbers, driver's licenses, and Spokio didn't exist. If all else failed, the teens just asked their fathers to vouch for them. That said, not all teens carried arms. A lot of the kids signed up for non-combat roles like joining the band as a drummer, flautist, or bugler. These non-combat roles also included being the kid to carry canteens, bandages, and stretchers. Some of the more skilled soldiers even assisted surgeons and nurses with the wounded and acted as a carrier pigeon by relaying orders on the battlefield. William Sherman coined the phrase, "war is hell," in 1879, 15 years after the Civil War, where he served as a general for the Union Army. Sherman knew a great deal about death on the battlefields because he saw a lot of it. For example, on July 1st, 1863, the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, Confederate soldiers marched onto the battlefield in straight lines toward their enemy. Union soldiers decimated the Confederate soldiers. According to the South's General Alfred Iverson, his soldiers died an honorable death. They nobly fought and perished without a man running to the rear. No greater gallantry and heroism has been displayed. The Confederate soldiers weren't as romantic about death on the battlefield as Iverson was. In fact, it sounded like they were fighting two different wars. Iverson's soldiers would recall huddling in the mud as bullets whizzed above them. One of Iverson's men described the moment when 79 of his fellow soldiers were slain in one volley. Great God, when will this stop? According to the book Hardy's Rifle and Light Infantry Tactics, soldiers from the North and South were supposed to be taken care of while issued the following: pork, bread, beef, vegetables, potatoes, peas, hominy, roasted coffee beans, sugar. Unfortunately, both sides of the war struggled to supply their soldiers with these basic necessities. The Confederates much more than the Union. Johnny Reb rarely saw any of the aforementioned rations. Instead, the Confederate soldiers subsisted on cornbread, coffee, cigarettes, and anything they could steal. Any food the soldiers did get their hands on often became infested with insects, especially rice or grain, within days. All of this meant that the soldiers had to rely on their cunning to survive. Soldiers would supplement their meager rations by foraging on the land, receiving boxes of food from their families, or trading items with other soldiers, even if they traded with the enemy. Yep, it wasn't uncommon for Union soldiers to trade their coffee with the Confederate soldiers in exchange for tobacco away from the eyes of their officers. Civil War soldiers didn't have much of a chance to live if they were seriously wounded in battle. Picture it. You're keeping the enemy at bay by shooting one round every 20 to 30 seconds. But as you pack your musket with gunpowder, you get hit in the stomach by enemy fire. In the 1860s, injured Civil War soldiers on both sides had to just sort of lie on the grassy knoll and play dead where they were shot in the hopes of an ambulance wagon coming by and tending to their wounds. If they were lucky, they had a flask full of sipping whiskey to numb the pain from the hole in their belly. If these soldiers were extra lucky, a horse-drawn ambulance wagon would come by with medical supplies and patch them up. If an ambulance wagon wasn't able to reach a wounded soldier out on the battleground, they would most likely perish. We're not going to sugarcoat it. Getting shot by the enemy with the Springfield Model 1861 musket was bad. But you know what was worse? Disease. The thing is, you might have lived if you were shot, but if you got sick, caught a disease, or developed an infection during what's been called the bloodiest war in American history, you were as good as dead. To put it in perspective, the Union suffered the loss of 44,000 lives from dysentery and diarrhea. To put it in perspective, the Union suffered the loss of 44,000 lives from dysentery. That's the equivalent of 10 Gettysburg battles. More men died from disease than anything else during the Civil War. Union Private Theodore Garish wrote this of the Civil War conditions he faced. One of the most disastrous features of the gloomy situation was the terrible sickness of the soldiers. Men were unused to the climate, the exposure, and the food, so that the whole experience was in direct contrast to their life at home. Infection was a major problem because doctors didn't sterilize equipment. During the course of the conflict in its entirety, hospital workers performed amputations on 60,000 men, with at least 1 in 4 dying from infection. We all remember why the Civil War happened, right? What we don't understand is how they thought black Americans were going to help and pitch in to destroy the Union. Because the Confederates were rightly concerned about arming their slaves, Southern black men were enlisted mostly for camp labor. The closest the Confederacy came to recruiting slaves to the ranks came in the last few desperate weeks of the war. In fact, when the Union began enlisting black soldiers, Confederate President Jefferson Davis declared that captured black soldiers would either be enslaved or executed. When a Confederate general suggested enlisting slaves, Confederate leaders scoffed. On March 13, 1865, the Confederate Congress allowed black soldiers to enlist, without promising their freedom after the conflict ended. Their desperate move made no difference. The war would be over less than a month later. As a Civil War soldier, if you weren't firing your musket at the face of your enemy on the battlefield or sleeping, you were running drills with your troop. Soldiers spent a majority of their waking hours preparing for active conflict by cleaning their firearm and learning drills and combat formations, with the occasional stint at guard duty or a long march. Private Theodore Garish of the Union explained how unprepared soldiers were at the very start of the war. We had never been drilled. An untrained drum corps furnished us with music. Each musician kept different time, and each man in the regiment took a different step. We marched, ran, walked, galloped, and stood still in our vain endeavors to keep step. If you were a black soldier and you proved yourself reputable, discrimination in pay was still par for the course in the early 1860s, even if you were defending the Union. Unfortunately, the Union didn't enlist black soldiers until 1862, but recruitment grew further after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863. And while they were getting paid, according to the Militia Act of 1862, black privates were still getting paid a lot less for equal work. Black soldiers received $10 a month with a $3 optional clothing deduction, while in comparison, white privates started at $13 a month and received a clothing allowance of $3.50. If you were one of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the front lines, stuffing your musket with bullets and gunpowder and firing every 20 seconds, if you were fast, there's a good chance your arms were useless by the end of the day. The rifled muskets that soldiers on both sides used weighed up to 10 pounds, and they would recoil with such force, just firing the thing could put your arm out of commission. Confederate Private Sam R. Watkins described the experience. After undressing, I found my limb all battered and bruised and bloodshot from my wrist to my shoulder, and as sore as a blister. I had shot 120 times that day. These muskets also regularly overheated, making them hard to reload. Watkins continued, "My arm became so hot that frequently the powder would flash before I could ram home the ball, and I had frequently to exchange my arm for that of a fallen comrade." We forgot to mention one thing that soldiers did when they weren't fighting, sleeping, or cleaning the rifle. They read and wrote like it was going out of style. It was really important for soldiers to read everything they could get their hands on and write to their loved ones as often as possible. The soldiers struggled to describe the horrors of the conflict in their letters home. Many thought they could not relate their experiences to civilian audiences, but some tried. Charles Carroll Maury, a captain for the Union, described one skirmish in stark terms. "Soon after we arrived on the ground, we were firing, and just after I had discharged my piece at a Johnny's head, I turned to reload. I saw a Reb who had got sight of me across his musket, and I can assure you my legs grew very short in a very short space of time, or else there was a joint in them. That is to say, I dropped down out of his sight just in time to hear his bullet whistle over my head. Then, knowing the danger had passed, I straightened up and finished loading." Maury felt lucky to be alive, writing, "I don't know what to say first, but we'll say praise God for his goodness in sparing my life while so many of our brave comrades have fallen victims to the enemy's shots." So what do you think? Would you want to be a soldier in the Civil War? Let us know in the comments below. And
Okay, so that gave you a really good example on what life was like. This is an animated map that I'm actually going to skip, but you can go online, you can watch all sorts of really great documentaries on the Gettysburg. You can watch all the great information that there is about the war. And I suggest that you do, because it's kind of like the start of everything in our nation, right? Oops, I do not want to play that. All right, so that is the end. So I do really, 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 really hope that you take some time out and that you watch a few videos on the Civil War. It's the start of all wars, essentially, in the United States, besides gaining our war of freedom, getting our independence. So with that, my friends, it is almost 12. I will let you have the rest of the time, unless you have someplace to be this afternoon. And I don't remember the schedule, and it will probably take me a few minutes to look for it. But if you need help, you can ask Miss Sam. Next week, we are going to talk about the Repair of the Nation, Industrial Revolution in America, which will lead us right up to World War I, which we've covered. So the final week for social studies, we're going to be talking about economics and doing a quick overview of economics, so you guys have that for your test. Other than that, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And yeah, we're gonna end a